Hey there, viewers, and welcome back to the South Main Auto Channel. Got us a 2008 non-Hemi Dodge Ram 2500 with the big 6.7 in it. Customer complaint is it will not crank. They replaced both batteries and put a new starter in it, and it still won't crank. What it does is when you get in the vehicle, and it's a stick shift, put a neutral, push on the clutch, go to start it. The starter engages one time, the engine rolls about, up on the compression stroke on one cylinder, and then it kicks back out, and you can continually do that, just like that, and that's all it does. To me, immediately right off the bat, that tells me voltage drop somewheres. Being that the batteries are new, the starter's new, what I've done to get it inside, because obviously I didn't want to push it, I went underneath, I unplugged the starter solenoid, I put a jumper wire on it, turned the key on, jumped it across the battery positive, the engine cranked over, it sounded like it was cranking slow to me. And then I started up, drove it inside. That's as far as I've got. I've printed this off, a wiring diagram for the starter circuit. First thing we need to do is see, is there voltage drop? A lot of potential for voltage drop in these. I did another video on I think it was a 550 we worked on, a Ford that had a dual battery set up, and I think it had a bad ground wire on the frame. Same type of symptom, wouldn't crank over. I believe the truck ran, I can't remember the particulars, but got a lot of slack in that video. People saying that they would have taken jumper cables and jumped from here to there, and from the battery to the frame, and stuff like that. I like to use a meter. Lots of different ways you can do it. You can do it with jumper cables and just start guessing and going around and until you get it, and then fix the problem there. We're going to use a meter. Always lots and lots of classes we've been to on voltage drop. However, we don't get to put it into practice a whole lot, or a lot of us don't. So hopefully that is the problem on this, and we get to see it. First off, what is voltage drop? Well, we think of our meter, the easiest way to think of your voltmeter is it measures difference, potential difference between this point, between battery positive and battery negative. It's going to tell you the potential difference, 12.66 volts on a battery. Now, theoretically, if we go from battery negative to a perfect ground with perfect wires and perfect connection, the difference between here and here should be, 0 volts or darn close to it. So if we just think of our meter as that, just measuring the pressure difference, if you will, between one point and another point. So that's why we can hook our meter from battery negative to ground. And, so let's just draw our meter in here, because this is one test we're going to do. We're going to go from battery negative to so this left side engine compartment. So I don't know if that hooks to the block. I assume it does. And we're going to stick our meter in here. This is our meter, and it's going to read our voltage difference. And there's always voltage drop in a circuit. What would we expect to see on this big ground circuit? Maybe I'm just throwing out a figure here. 300 millivolts, or a half a volt. Some factors in here are connections, size of the current carrying capability of the wire. Again, connections at the battery. And you also have to be mindful that you can actually have voltage drop right at the battery. So let's say this is our battery post, and around it we have the terminal. This is my best attempt at drawing the terminal. Comes down, and then of course you've got your wire that goes out, and then your bolt that goes through it. You could have voltage drop from that battery post to that battery terminal. I had a Dodge truck in one time. That's where the voltage drop was. It was dropping almost 11 volts between here and there. Well, what's that mean? It means you need to take your terminal off and clean it. Lots of potentials and problems on this. We go from battery positive, batteries are hooked in parallel. So we could have voltage drop from this battery to that battery, or from the battery to the starter, or from the starter to the engine block, or from the ground side of the battery, negative side of the battery, to wherever these ground connections are, G100, G111. So lots of different potentials. We're going to check the easiest ones first and take it from there, but hopefully that kind of sums up to you guys what voltage drop is. So to give you an idea, here's what everything looks like. There's their new batteries. I do see some green crusties growing right there, and this cable is the cable that runs over to this battery. And according to our diagram, if our diagram's right, we've got this ground that goes from the battery to something. I don't know if it's engine block and to frame, and then or from battery to frame, and then from frame to engine block. I'm not 100% sure. We're not really concerned with it right now. Then we have the positive battery here. I don't know where this goes. Looks like something new they added on, perhaps I think the air intake heater's down there. We've got a wire here that runs to the alternator. We're not super concerned with that at this point, but I believe this battery cable comes around, goes here, around town, and then just up to this battery. And it, you know, provides it just with more cranking amperage. And of course, then we have our ground on this side, which goes to, you know, either the frame or the engine block. Not sure yet at this point. So that's that. Also, I hooked us up a push button starter. The batteries sound, I mean, it sounds like it cranks slow to me. First thing first, we should do is check battery voltage. And technically, before we're chasing down any starter circuit problems, we should have fully charged batteries, which they're new, but if it has voltage drop problems, perhaps it has affected, you know, the way it charges also. So we're just going to go to the digital meter here. We'll set it up on 20 volts, and then we'll go through. What the heck's going on here? Are we on 20 volts? We are. So we will see what our batteries are at currently. Oh, I got them backwards. Don't know what I'm doing. Where are we at? 12.5, so we're close enough there. Let me just, for grins and giggles here, I'll run over. I'll throw these leads on the other battery just to see. Should be the same if they're hooked together here. Where are we at? Oops, switch my leads around. 12.15. So technically they should be the same. However, if we do have a cruddy connection from battery to battery, we're going to get our symptoms plus voltage differences. Let's just check this one again. I'm checking right on the terminals. Yeah, 12.5. I need to switch these around because I'm going to keep getting confused here. So that is a clue in and of itself. First voltage drop we can do, pick your poison. We can go voltage drop from negative battery to engine block where the starter is actually mounted. Technically, we should be going from the center post on the battery, not the cable, the actual battery itself. This is where the pixies start, right to the starter case, not the engine block. Because we could have a poor ground from the starter case to the block, or we could have a poor connection between, like I say, the center of the battery stud and the actual cable itself. So, you know, I'll typically start kind of broader picture. We'll go center battery stud to engine block. If, you know, voltage drop looks good there, I'll kind of disregard it for the time being. And if I'm not finding anything yet, then I'll crawl underneath it and go to the starter case. Typically, you should work out and then work your way in. So let's say we had 3 volts of voltage drop from battery negative to the starter case. Well, now we're going to go from battery negative to the engine block, still have your voltage drop. Then we're going to go from battery center, battery post to actual cable. So you can start any way you want. Most of the tests are pretty quick. Being that we have battery voltage differential here, I think the smartest thing to do in this case is to go from battery positive to battery positive just to check. We got to start somewhere, so that's where we're going to start. And again, I'm going to try to start in the center of the battery post if I can. Hopefully these are kind of sharp enough to poke in there. Doesn't matter which one you use. Let's see if we can't, look at that. See if we can't get that to balance in there. And I'll get this one tossed over to the other side. And we will go right to battery positive over there also. So battery positive to battery positive. I'll see if I can't get this poked in without knocking our wires off here. I think, oops. Try to get a good connection here for us. Like I say, resist the urge to go on the actual cables. And look at that. So that's our difference just from battery to battery. So hopefully that helps explain it. We already have 300 millivolts of voltage drop from battery to battery just because of the difference in, you know, state of charge of the batteries. So now when we crank it, let's take and put this on a graph because sometimes that helps represent it a little bit better here. Let's see. Let me just change our scale. We'll just go 10 volts in case it's really bad. We'll bring 20 seconds across the screen. Well, actually, we'll keep it on 10. Okay, so now we're gonna crank it. We're at 0.3 volts difference because we're just measuring pressure differential or voltage differential between the two batteries. Let our screen refresh here, and we'll crank it. I don't know if you guys could see it, but that was almost 4 volts. That's pretty big. I tell you what, let's take and put this back just in digital. This will help us see it a little better. So now we're almost at half a volt difference. I'm going to go ahead and crank it because you have to check. That's the other thing with voltage drop. There has to be current draw. No current flow, no voltage drop. So our current consumer is the starting motor. So right there, we have 4 volts difference between the two batteries. Being that we have corrosion over here, I'm going to assume it's right there. So let's grab our meter lead from over here. Bring that over there. And I tell you what, we're going to hook that, wherever this is, we're going to hook that right to that battery cable, just for grins and giggles. And let's see if we have the same voltage drop. We had what, about 4 volts? So we got the same differential there. And this is going to eliminate our cable. If our voltage drop is the same from here, from this battery cable to that center post, then we know our connection there is, well, that doesn't eliminate that connection, does it? Yes. So let's see if our voltage drop is the same. Actually got a little worse. All right, well, some days better be lucky than good. Right now, we have a problem. We have voltage drop from this cable to that center post on the battery. So before we even get any further doing any more tests, we're going to take this off. We're going to clean it up, try to resolve the voltage drop on the positive side, and then see. I mean, that may be our only problem. I know a lot of you guys are pretty technical, probably called me out on it. Technically, we should have taken a voltage drop measurement also from this cable to this outer terminal, because that would tell us definitively, you know, because potentially we could have a problem from this terminal to the battery's center post. We could have had a great connection from here to here, which I highly doubt just based on the looks of it. But technically, to chase it down further to determine, is it this connection or is it from the terminal to here? At a certain point, it gets kind of redundant because it only takes, you know, a few extra seconds to just, you know, take care of both connections while you're in here, which is what I'm going to do. I've got this cable off. I did not unhook the other battery, but you can see how crappy this is. This should have been cleaned up when they put new batteries in. Perhaps it would have solved all their problems, and perhaps it was the original problem. I'm going to work on, I got to grab this pair of vice grips. We're going to take this battery bolt out. We're going to clean up this positive connection. We're going to clean this up. I'm going to leave the rest of the stuff as cruddy as it is, just so we can see, was this our only problem? And yes, I know, visual inspection, we didn't have to pull out a meter. Chances are this is our problem, but I'd like for you guys to see what voltage drop looks like. You know, let's say these connections look beautiful, and you're like, oh yeah, I know it's not my battery connections, they look good, they look clean. Well, how can we tell for sure? Where's our voltage drop lay? Well, the only way to do it is to actually put it into practice. So the battery terminal has been removed. I cleaned inside the terminal, I cleaned the post, used the Whizzy wheel. We cleaned off the copper lug from that battery over to this battery. Everything's been put back on. Of course, I took the bolt out, we cleaned that also. You got to have super clean connections, fresh lead, you know, clean lead against lead. You know, lead oxide can sometimes have voltage drop. You know, as I mentioned, I don't sound like a broken record, but right from the terminal to that post, it seems ridiculous, but it can. So now we're going to rerun the same test. We're just going to do it right from here. We're going to hook right on to the battery cable from that battery. And then we're going to go right into the center post of this battery. And we can see we have about 10 millivolts. I guess we can probably change our scale because I'm assuming it's going to be a lot less. Oops. Where are we? We'll go down to, let's say, a 2-volt scale. All right, we're going to crank it. 30 millivolts, battery to battery, and we can hear, I don't know if you guys can tell, but the engine cranks much, much better. All from just one cruddy connection, battery to battery. chances are I hooked the terminal back to the starter, this thing will start under its own power. For what it's worth, we can do a quick voltage drop from the negative side to the engine block just to see, for example, what we're at. So we're going to switch our lead over here to battery negative. Let me get my other clamp here. And like I say, technically we should be going to the starter case. If you want to do this 100% properly, it should be going to the starter case. The starter is brand new. I'm going to make an assumption, which I shouldn't. I'm going to assume it's clean and bolted to the block, you know, as it should be. That's a huge assumption. So I'm going to go right, I'm hooked right here to, looks like where the EGR used to be, or something, to the center battery stud. And you can see we're about 30 millivolts. Let's crank it. Our voltage drop there is fine. We could also go from negative battery to negative battery based on just the way it sounds. I'm sure we have this vehicle fixed. Let's just, I'm going to crawl under there. We're going to hook the starter back up the way it should be and see if it starts under its own power now. All right. 258,000 miles on the old Dodge. Oh, now she cranks like a champ. Back this thing up a little bit. Whoa, roll some coal, baby. Money lights on, ABS lights on. We'll just crank her one more time here. Oh boy. Well, that's it. That was easy. All right, folks, so that's it. That was the problem with this one, or the biggest problem, is voltage drop from battery to battery. The battery over here, over on the one that we fixed the correct connection on, was technically the only one hooked to the starter circuit. So it drew so much amperes, dropped voltage so low, the ECM would, you know, kick out, and that was it. Because these newer cars, I don't know if a lot of you guys, or if any of you have experienced, you know, low voltage conditions, like the battery's only got 11 volts. You know, an old school starter, yeah, it'd crank the engine slow enough and, you know, it'd fire right up. With these new cars, they drop down below, let's say, 9 volts. Cranking, ECM, you know, kicks out, and that's it, because they are a electronically or ECM controlled starter, in the sense that that's what turns on the starter relay. So, I guess that's it. Now, technically, I should go through and, you know, voltage drop the rest of the circuit. I know that's the main problem. You can use voltage drop for testing any circuit with a load on it, and that's what I wanted to kind of use this video to show you. Yeah, that terminal is green and crusty. We could have took a big fat guess, but I wanted to use it as an opportunity to show you, you know, well, what's voltage drop look like? We always hear about it. We don't often see it. We get to see a lot of good stuff. So, I mean, you can voltage drop test, or you should voltage drop test, you know, fuel pumps. I mean, if you got dim headlights, you know, anytime on any video where we found, you know, a Chrysler with a bad ground, yeah, we'll load the circuit. Oh, ground's missing. If we did a voltage drop test, it would be, you know, whatever battery voltage is, because the difference between this point and that point is going to be, you know, your voltage drop. So think of your meter as a pressure tester. How much pressure do I have here, and how much do I have here? And, you know, it depends on the circuit you're testing, but all the voltage should be consumed across the load. So do some looking, do some research on it, and, you know, use that method, but always remember that you cannot voltage drop test a circuit unless it's loaded. You know, example, the starter motor's cranking. If you're voltage drop testing the alternator circuit, you know, the thing has to be on, it has to be charging. You're going to check the difference between that alternator battery, alternator positive, and the battery positive. What's the difference there? Is there some corrosion? We've done some videos on that. I think it was a Ford Explorer that we did, where there was, you know, several volts of voltage drop from the alternator to the battery positive. Alternator's putting out 14 volts. Batteries only has, you know, 12.2 or whatever the case was. It can be caused from corrosion, undersized wires that can't carry current, and there are voltage drops that are acceptable. Anytime there's a connection, anytime there's a relay, there's going to be some loss of voltage across those contacts. So keep that in mind. Do a little research. You'll find out what is acceptable, or do some testing on circuits that don't have problems, and you'll see, you know, kind of get a good feel for it. It's good to know what's good before you start trying to figure out what's bad. You know, in a case like this, you know, clearly 4 volts is too much. So Anyhow, go down. I know it's a lot of rambling. Leave any questions, comments, or concerns in the comment box below. Try to answer them. Other folks in the South Main Auto YouTube comment community can also help answer those questions. And while you're down there, click subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff. And just remember, viewers, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching. Alright folks, it's bonus footage time. Finishing out my checks. Here's the battery positive on the other side. This is where the alternator runs to it. I just wanted to do, I like to keep in practice. Yeah, I know that connection looks cruddy, but is it? You know, does it just look bad or is it really bad? Let me set this up for you. Hopefully you guys can see that. So I'm going to go from center post to the battery cable that runs to that side, and what, 8 millivolts, that's nothing. This wire here that goes to the intake heater, we're going to go from the intake heater, which isn't even drawing current now, but we're going to measure the difference between just this cable, so to the center battery stud, we got 120 millivolts. That is the difference. I don't know if you guys can see it. Let me scoot you around here. I don't know if you can hear me. So if we have corrosion between where this wire hooks up and this battery stud, there's going to be a voltage difference. There clearly is. Like I say, that's 120 millivolts and it's not even drawing current. Now I'm going to try to get on just the alternator. See if I can do this. Get on just the island of the alternator. In the battery terminal, 120 millivolts. 120 millivolts. There's corrosion right here. And the thing is, this is hot to the touch. Let me go get a thermal imager. And by thermal imager, I mean regular temperature gun because I don't have one. Let's just see. So the battery itself is 68.2 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to go over to this connection. And it maxed out at 146 degrees. So voltage drop is going to create resistance. Resistance is going to create heat. This is actually hot to the touch. Max reading that time is 160 degrees. So that could be another clue for you. So I'll get this fixed. Let me see. I don't know if I get to the back of that alternator. We're going to hook one lead right to the stud on the alternator, and we'll see what the difference is. We'll see the total voltage drop in that circuit. Perhaps there's more. Should have just included this in the regular part of the video. Alright, so that's on the back side of the alternator. Now we'll go right to the center of this battery post. We should have at least 120 millivolts, right? We know that. And there's our total voltage drop in that circuit. Almost 2/10 of a volt. So that's the difference between charging at 14 volts or 13.8. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you start putting more load on that and you create more heat, and then the voltage drop actually increases. So anyhow, I'll show you the other way that you can see that. That might help. Might help you. So what's our voltage drop? We'll just round it up to 0.2, okay? So now, the back of the alternator, so we're 14.8 volts. I'm assuming when we check the battery, we're going to be about 14.6. 14.8 there. We come there and we're 14.6. So we're missing the 2/10 of volt. So I'll clean that connection. Alright, so let's check this same circuit again. Everything's been removed and cleaned. We'll just go from flip right onto the back of that alternator again and see. Now this is where there's going to be some acceptable voltage drop, I'm going to assume, because we've got a small gauge wire from the alternator to the battery. We've got a connection on the back of the alternator. We've got a connection here. There is going to be some voltage drop. We're on the back of the alternator. And we're down to about 70 millivolts. That's perfectly acceptable. I have all the loads on the vehicle turned on. Headlights are on, blowers on. So you're going to see some voltage drop. 60 millivolts, I'm not concerned with it. So you'll see our charging voltage at the battery, 14.6. At the 14.54. If we're dealing with small numbers now, we're going to go with the alternator. It's going to be like 14.62 or something like that probably. There you go. So 14.6 in the alternator. Yeah, 14.62. If we're dealing with only small numbers, 14.6. So just that little bit of voltage drop. Some of you might ask, why did I chase down 120 millivolts? Simply because, I mean, that's pretty significant given where the voltage drop was occurring, right there at the battery stud. Plus it was getting hot. And I've seen in cases where you start to build heat from corrosion and the voltage drop gets worse very, very quickly. So keep that in mind.